Chapter 1. The Shepherd's Valley. In a quiet valley nestled between gentle hills, far from the noise of cities and the worries of men, there lived a shepherd named Eliam. He was neither famous nor rich, and yet he was deeply known by his flock. Each morning, before the sun cast its first golden rays across the fields, Eliam would rise and walk among his sheep, calling them each by name. Yes, by name, for though others might have seen only animals, Eliam saw souls. His flock was large, 100 sheep, strong and healthy, with wool soft as clouds and eyes full of life. There was Brisa, the spirited one who loved to race down the slopes. There was Sela, quiet and thoughtful, often found resting under the olive trees. There was Ronel, who liked to nudge at Eliam's side as he walked, never far behind. And among them, there was one small sheep, the youngest, named Luma. Luma had been born during a cold spring storm, frail and uncertain. 4 days after her birth, Eliam slept beside her, warming her with his own coat and whispering gentle songs as wind and thunder rolled outside the pen. Against all odds, she had survived. Since then, Luma had become curious, always trailing butterflies, straying a little too far, enchanted by the world's whispers. The valley was peaceful. Birds sang from fig trees, the grass swayed in the wind, and the stream that ran alongside the field glistened with clear, laughing water. Each day followed a rhythm: pastures in the morning, shade in the afternoon, rest in the evening. The sheep trusted Eliam. He knew where to find fresh grass when drought threatened, and how to guide them away from hidden thorns and shadowy ravines. But more than that, the sheep felt something deeper, a presence, a watchfulness, a quiet kind of love that didn't ask to be noticed. Eliam never struck them. He never shouted. He simply walked, and they followed. And when one stumbled, he lifted it. When one cried out, he answered. When wolves circled at a distance, he stood between danger and the flock, staff in hand, eyes steady. To others, he was just a man with sheep. But to the sheep, Eliam was everything. As the sun dipped low one evening, painting the hills in hues of amber and rose, Eliam stood watching his flock settle into sleep. The stars blinked into the sky one by one, and the night breeze whispered across the valley. All was well. All was safe. Or so it seemed. But unseen among the shadows, a small figure stirred, unnoticed by the rest, unnoticed even by herself. Luma, drawn by a flicker in the distance. A light, perhaps? A sound. Quietly wandered toward the edge of the field, where the fence had been bent by last week's storm. Her nose to the grass, ears alert, she stepped beyond the boundary, and vanished into the darkness. Eliam didn't see. Not yet. But something in the stars shifted. A silence passed over the field, the kind of silence that comes just before a heart realizes something is missing. Chapter 2. A Hollow in the Night. The wind picked up gently as the valley fell deeper into sleep. The sheep, nestled in the folds of the earth like scattered clouds, shifted now and then, but most rested still and peaceful. Eliam stood at the edge of the flock, arms crossed, his staff leaning against his shoulder. His eyes scanned the horizon not out of worry, but out of habit, the kind born of years spent caring, watching, listening. He exhaled softly, whispering an evening prayer. May your peace cover them, Lord, each one. He turned to prepare his own rest, a worn blanket beneath a fig tree, his cloak drawn tight, the stars overhead like old companions. But as he sat, he paused. Something tugged at the edges of his awareness, something faint, like the missing note in a melody. He stood again, his gaze moving slowly across the flock. He counted. 10, 20, 40. It was something he'd done since his youth. His father had taught him, know your flock, son, not just the whole but each heart in it. Eliam reached 99. His breath caught. He looked again, slower now. Once more. 99. A chill moved up his spine, not from the night air, but from a quiet, sharp realization. Luma was not there. He walked swiftly through the flock, checking each small, sleeping shape. He called softly, Luma? Little one. No answer. Only the wind. He circled the enclosure, his heart pounding now. The fence. The bent place. He hadn't fixed it yet. She was curious. She had always been curious. Eliam turned toward the hills. To leave now meant leaving the 99 alone. Vulnerable. But his feet were already moving.
He didn't hesitate, not even for a breath. With nothing but his staff and a small oil lamp, he crossed the threshold of the pasture and stepped into the dark.
He didn't know where Luma had gone.
He didn't know how far. But he knew one thing with complete certainty. He would not stop until he found her. The night had changed. It was no longer peaceful. Trees rustled with strange energy, and the shadows moved like thoughts unspoken. But Ilium walked on, calling her name gently. "Luma, come home." There was no anger in his voice. No frustration. Only concern. Only love. He searched behind the olive trees. He climbed the lower ridge, scanning the rocks. He knelt beside the stream, looking for fresh tracks. His heart ached with each passing minute. Where was she? Chapter 3. Through Shadows and Thorns. The wind whispered through the hills like an ancient lullaby, but Ilium heard none of it. His focus was sharpened into a single thread. Luma. He held the flickering lamp close as he moved deeper into the wilderness. The familiar paths ended quickly, swallowed by thorny underbrush and crooked stone. He could feel the night growing colder, not just around him, but inside him. Each moment that passed stretched the distance between him and the lamb he loved. He knew these hills, but at night, they became unfamiliar, even unfriendly. Still he pressed on. His sandals scraped against the rocks, occasionally slipping on loose gravel. Low-hanging branches caught his sleeves and hair. Thorn bushes snagged his cloak and skin. But not once did he stop to tend to his own scrapes or bruises. He had only one question burning in his chest. Is she afraid? Somewhere out there, under the vast black sky, a small lamb was alone, without her flock, without safety, without warmth. She might be stuck, or lost, or worse, caught in a predator's path. Ilium shook his head, refusing to let fear dictate his thoughts. But he could not ignore the urgency growing louder with each heartbeat. He paused near a jagged cliffside, holding his lamp high. The light pushed back the darkness in a trembling arc. The rocks below seemed to shift and move, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of motion, something small, pale, just beyond the reach of the light.
"Luma!" he called again, louder this time, his voice cracking with both hope and fatigue.
Nothing. Just the rustling of dry leaves and the echo of his own call. He moved on, climbing higher.
The elevation chilled the air, but he welcomed the pain in his legs.
Pain meant progress. Pain meant he hadn't given up.
As he reached a narrow path that twisted between the rocks, he stopped. The ground was softer here, dirt instead of stone, and faint hoofprints broke the surface.
Small ones. Fresh ones. His breath caught. She had come this way. He wasn't imagining it. "Luma," he said again, this time with a tremble in his voice.
"I'm here, little one.
I'm not leaving until you're safe."
He followed the trail, inch by inch, calling gently every few steps. His voice, once strong, had begun to fray at the edges. His lamp flickered lower. He held it close to his chest to shield it from the wind, praying it wouldn't go out before he found her. Then, a sound. Not loud, not clear, but definitely there. A faint, high-pitched bleating. It came from just ahead, hidden in the folds of the rocky hill. Ilium surged forward. His heart pounded. He slipped on the slope, falling to his hands, scraping his palms, but he scrambled up again, following the cry. "Luma!" He rounded a boulder, and there she was. The little lamb stood trembling on a narrow ledge, her wool wet from dew, her legs shaking. She had wandered too far and couldn't find her way back. Behind her, a steep drop. One wrong step and... Ilium moved slowly, lowering his voice into a soft murmur. "Shoo! It's all right. I'm here. You're not alone." She bleated again, eyes wide with fear, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Ilium dropped to his knees and slowly stretched out his arm. The ledge was narrow, too narrow for him to climb out to her. So he lay flat, inching forward, extending his staff toward her, whispering gently all the while. "Come, little one. Trust me." She hesitated. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then she stepped forward, just enough for her leg to reach the crook of the staff. Ilium pulled gently. She resisted at first, confused and frightened. But his calm voice never changed. With one last bleat,
She allowed herself to be drawn forward. And then, suddenly, she was in his arms. Safe. He held her close, burying his face in her soft wool, his whole body shaking. He whispered words of comfort, of relief, of gratitude. She was trembling too, but slowly calmed, curling into his embrace like she remembered it. The shepherd had come, and he had not stopped until she was found. Ilium rose carefully, holding Luma close to his chest. He turned back toward the pasture, back toward the safety of the fold. The journey would be long. The night would last a little longer. But he would carry her the whole way. And not once would he complain. Because that's what love does. It searches. It carries. It never gives up. Chapter 4. The Journey Home. The wind had settled into a quiet hush as Ilium began his descent from the hills. Cradled securely in his arms was a small lamb, Luma, her breathing slow and even now, her trembling subsiding as warmth returned to her body. She was safe. But their journey was not yet finished. The path back was darker than before. The oil in Ilium's lamp was nearly gone, the flame a tired flicker, but he walked steadily. Each step was careful, not rushed, not out of fear, but of love. He didn't want to jostle the little one. She had been frightened enough for one night. The air felt heavier, as if it too carried the weight of the ordeal. Yet Ilium's heart was lighter now. He had found her. He had held her again. And no matter how far she had wandered, she had never left his thoughts. As they moved through the valley, sounds of the night slowly returned. Crickets. A distant owl. The gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Nature itself seemed to exhale with relief. "Do you hear that, little one?" he whispered as Luma shifted in his arms. "That's the night telling you everything will be all right." He remembered the first time he'd held her, a tiny, wobbly creature who didn't even know how to stand on her own. He had helped her learn to walk, to feed, to follow. She had been so curious, so brave. And sometimes, just like now, that curiosity led her too far. But she had always trusted him. He looked down at her. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing even. She trusted him still. The narrow mountain paths gave way to gentler slopes. The stars above began to shift position, hinting at the coming dawn. Ilium's legs were tired. His shoulders ached. But not once did he think of putting her down. It wasn't just the job of a shepherd to protect. It was his joy. Behind them lay the sharp rocks, the bramble thickets, and the shadows. Ahead lay the fields, and the flock. As they approached the outskirts of the pasture, the familiar shapes of the pen came into view. The fencing. The olive trees nearby. The small fire still glowing where he had left it. And then, movement. The other sheep were stirring. He hadn't expected it. The night should have lulled them to rest. But somehow they knew. The flock was gathered near the gate, as if waiting, watching the hillside where their shepherd had disappeared. Some of them bleated softly. Ilium smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. "They missed you," he said to Luma. He crossed the final stretch of grass and stepped inside the pen. The gate creaked gently as he secured it behind him. The other sheep gathered around, curious and calm. They didn't seem to mind that the shepherd had left them. There was no resentment, only quiet welcome. He gently lowered Luma to the ground. She stood wobbly at first, but her legs held. One of the older sheep nudged her affectionately. A few more came close, brushing their heads against hers. No one scolded her for getting lost. No one turned away. She was home. Ilium stepped back and watched the reunion, his heart full. But he wasn't finished yet. He walked toward the house nearby, where an old brass horn hung by the door. He took it down and raised it to his lips. A single blast echoed across the valley. Low, warm, resonant. A signal. One that would carry through the hills, reaching nearby farms, villages, and homes. The neighbors would know what it meant. That a shepherd had found his lost sheep. That something that had once been broken was now restored. And that joy was meant to be shared. Soon, there would be a fire lit, and bread prepared, and wine poured. People would come to celebrate. Not because it was required, but because love like this deserved a feast. And in the center of it all would be the smallest lamb in the fold, the one who had wandered, been lost and found again. Chapter 5.
The celebration. The sky had begun to shift from deep indigo to a warm, expectant gray. Morning was coming. The first light would soon stretch across the hills and spill gently into the valley, painting the earth with gold. But in Eliam's home, a different kind of light was already glowing, the light of joy. Word of the lost sheep's return spread quickly. The shepherd's trumpet had awakened nearby shepherds, farmers, and even some villagers who lived close to the pasture. By the time the sun had risen, a handful of friends were already making their way up the narrow path to Eliam's house, their lanterns bobbing, their smiles warm despite the early hour. Eliam had begun preparing even before they arrived. He brought out fresh loaves from the clay oven, opened jars of honey, dates, and olives, and poured water from the cool cistern. He even uncorked a flask of aged wine he had been saving, not for a holiday, not for a festival, but for a moment like this. The house was simple, built from sun-baked stone with a thatched roof and small windows that framed the pasture. Inside, it was no palace, but it was full of life. The scent of bread mingled with the morning dew. The fire crackled softly. And the centerpiece of it all was not the food, or the guests, but a story. The story of a single sheep. Luma had been cleaned and gently brushed. A soft cloth had been wrapped around her to keep her warm. She lay near the hearth now, curled beside Eliam's feet, blinking sleepily but calm. The other sheep were back in the pen, peaceful and quiet, as if they too understood something sacred had happened. Guests began arriving, neighbors, old friends, even a few children rubbing their eyes and carrying baskets of fruit. Some offered gifts, others simply embraced Eliam, clapping him on the back and laughing. "You found her," one said. "I knew you wouldn't give up," said another. "It's just one sheep," said a gruff old man with a beard like tangled rope, "but it means the world, doesn't it?" Eliam only smiled. They sat together around the fire, the circle growing larger, warmer. Someone brought out a lute and played soft melodies while bread was passed around. Laughter mixed with music. It was not a loud celebration, but a deep one, full of meaning, like a heartbeat that had been paused and now resumed. A younger shepherd, not more than 20, turned to Eliam as the music quieted. "Why did you go after her?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You had 99 still with you. Most wouldn't have risked the night for one." Eliam looked into the flames for a long moment before answering. "She would have never made it on her own," he said softly. "And I would never be at peace knowing she was out there, afraid in the dark." "But you didn't know where she was," said the young man. "I didn't have to," Eliam replied. "She was mine." That was enough. There was a stillness that followed. A stillness not of silence, but of understanding. Even the children, usually restless, seemed to absorb the weight of his words. A woman across the room wiped her eyes. "It's like us, isn't it?" she said quietly. "We're that sheep." Eliam didn't respond. Not with words, at least. He looked down at Luma, then back at the faces of his guests, and nodded. The celebration continued long into the morning. As the sun rose, casting golden light over the hills and pastures, laughter spilled out of the house, joining the birdsong. The scent of warm bread carried on the breeze. The sheep in the pen stirred gently, unaware of how their smallest member had become a symbol of something eternal. And as the day began anew, so did something deeper in the hearts of those who had gathered. They hadn't just witnessed the return of a sheep. They had seen a truth, that even the smallest, most wayward life is worth the search, the struggle, and the joy of being brought home. Final chapter, ASH. As the story draws to a close, we step back, away from the hills of Judea, from the flickering firelight in Eliam's home, from the celebration of a sheep once lost and now found. And we begin to understand that this story is not only about shepherds and animals. It's about something far more eternal. Jesus once told this parable not to teach animal care, but to reveal the very nature of God's heart. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, he said, "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it?" It's a question with only one true answer. Yes, the shepherd goes. Always. Every time. Because that's what love does. You see, in the eyes of the world, losing 1 out of 100 might seem insignificant, acceptable, logical. But in the eyes of the shepherd, that one matters infinitely. That one is worth the mountain path, the stormy night,
the call into the void. That one is not forgotten, not dismissed, not expendable. And if you've ever felt like that one, separated, unseen, overlooked, wandering, then this story is for you. Maybe you've drifted far, not even sure how you got there. Maybe the voices of guilt, fear, or doubt have grown louder than your sense of belonging. Maybe you think you're too far gone, too small to be remembered. But the shepherd sees you. He leaves the 99 not because they are unloved, but because they are safe. And you, lost, hurting, tired, are not an accident. You are his. And he will walk through the darkness, brave the cliffs, and call your name until you are found. And when you are found, there is no scolding, no punishment, no shame. There is joy.
There is lifting you upon his shoulders, carrying you home with the warmth of his heartbeat against yours.
There is a gathering of those who care, a rejoicing that echoes not just on earth but in heaven itself.
I tell you, Jesus said, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent.
This story is more than a parable. It is a glimpse into the heart of God. A heart that never gives up, never grows weary, never stops searching. A heart that values you, not for your performance, not for your perfection, but simply because you are his.
And so the question remains, have you heard his voice? Perhaps it's faint, like a whisper carried on the wind. Perhaps it's calling from the edge of your soul, asking, where are you?
Not with anger, but with yearning. Let the story remind you, you are never too far, never too lost. The shepherd is on his way. He will find you. He will rejoice. And all of heaven will sing, because you were never forgotten. You were always loved.